Cedar Point has no room for future roller coasters without ripping one out, or do they? Because I'm going to show you 3 locations where Cedar Point could open their next major roller coaster without removing a ride or an existing coaster. I will also share with you my predictions as to when this new coaster would open, plus much more. Welcome to Keep Riding Coasters, and now let's get into this. To start these predictions off, let's take a look at the timeline for Cedar Point's next roller coaster. In 2023, we saw the Family Wild Mouse coaster open, and then in 2024, Cedar Point's reimagining of Dragster Top Thrill 2 is going to open. So I would guesstimate that Cedar Point spent around $20 million for both of these coasters. And in regards to Cedar Point, that is cheap for not only 1 but 2 coasters. So I think that it's very safe to predict that we could see Cedar Point's next major coaster open in 2027, mainly due to the other parks in the chain getting new coasters in 2025 and 2026. Though, I still think there is a slight chance that the next one could come in 2026. With the park not spending as much money as they usually do for a new coaster as of late, I predict that the budget for Cedar Point's next coaster would be north of $20 million, which means a rather large thrill machine. It's time to focus on the locations. And while Cedar Point could remove either Gemini, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Iron Dragon, or even Corkscrew, I predict that the arrows are all safe for now. And as far as I know, the only rumor that I've heard multiple times is Corkscrew could be on its way out very soon. Now, I've not heard that in quite some time, but it was around for a good amount of time. This is why I predict that for Cedar Point's next roller coaster, we will not see any current coaster get removed to make way for it. And in case you're wondering, here is how Cedar Point can accomplish just that. Location number 1. The old dorms plot of land. Now, while at first glance, this area doesn't seem too large, however, there's over 3 acres here. And to put that in perspective, Valravn, the park's B&M dive coaster, takes up only 2.58 acres. Now talk about an optical illusion. Now the main benefit of adding a new coaster to this area is that it will give the center of the park another major coaster, and having the ride be located in this area would look visually awesome. Plus, this midway has not looked the same since Wildcat was removed in 2011. Another thing too is, it would be very easy for Cedar Point to reroute the road to fit in a new coaster here. Location number 2. Between Gemini and Steel Vengeance. Now currently, as you can see, there are some maintenance buildings that call this land home. However, since Cedar Point is lacking on space, they could easily relocate them somewhere else on the peninsula, or most likely, and better yet, off of the peninsula altogether. What's interesting about this is that Cedar Point has already relocated a lot of the back areas off of the peninsula. So this is very possible. And in terms of size, this area is just over 3.3 acres and could easily be extended to make a larger footprint. I don't know about you, but I've always been intrigued by this area, and I personally think that over the next 15 years, we will see a new coaster located here. Speaking of Cedar Point's awesome coasters, here is a look at all of my Cedar Point inspired merchandise, including the very popular Baby I'm Ready to Go merch and the Arms Down, Head Back Dragster merch line. Also, for all of my Millennium Force fans out there, you will love the original Giga merch, and you can find all these designs and more in my merch store, keepridingcoasters.com. Location number 3, along the Lake Erie shoreline. While this location is probably the least likely to have a chance at becoming home to Cedar Point's next roller coaster, I have to mention it, because this area really is too good to be true. The only negative I have with this location is you would remove a good amount of parking spaces to make way for a coaster that would run along the shoreline of Lake Erie. Now the good news is Cedar Point could fit in a coaster in this area as you see here and not extend it over Blue Streak and along the Lake Erie shoreline. With my idea, all we would see is this picnic pavilion get removed. Now could Cedar Point remove more? I mean, sure they could, but the big question is, would they? It all depends on how often these picnic pavilions are getting used. And if you know that answer, be sure to let me know in the comments, because I'm sure others are curious as well. But I gotta say, I love the idea of adding what could become the best coaster at the point in this area to really spread out the crowds. And I'm working on a brand new Cedar Point coaster concept that shows you just how the longest roller coaster in the history of Cedar Point could fit in this area. So if you want to see more of this, then be sure to give this video a like. And once I get 1,000 likes, I will release this awesome video. Now as for Millennium Island, because I know a lot of you will bring it up in the comments, I can see this area being home to some new family rides and a pathway that connects the Gemini Midway and the Frontier Trail in the future. And besides, this video breaks down the locations where Cedar Point would not have to remove any rides or coasters. And if Cedar Point would ever add on to Millennium Island, then I guarantee you a ride or two would get relocated or removed. And I'm looking at you, Snake River Falls. Now, if you are planning a trip to Cedar Point, then you do not want to miss out on my Cedar Point must-know tips video, because I share with you the best ways to plan your Cedar Point vacation and how you can save money and so much time and more. And for your convenience, you can find a link to that video in the description of this one. So now that you know about the 3 locations where Cedar Point could realistically build their next roller coaster without removing a ride or coaster, you're probably wondering which location I am leaning towards being the most likely chance of happening. And for the record, I do personally think that the most likely location for the next coaster would be where the Snake River Falls attraction is currently located, and using this area of Millennium Island. Again, that is if Cedar Point would remove a ride to make way for the next coaster. And taking a closer look at this area, Snake River Falls is a 30-year-old water ride which was built by Aerodynamics. So yeah, this attraction's days are numbered. And this area is a very nice sized plot of land, especially when you combine it with Millennium Island. However, if Cedar Point doesn't remove any rides or coasters for this project, then this is where I can see the new coaster being located. With a 10% chance of happening, I can see the coaster opening up in between Vengeance and Gemini. I love this idea and location, but I don't see it happening quite yet. I'm going to give the dorm location a 40% chance of happening. Something has to be built here eventually, right? I mean, it only makes sense. And with a 50% chance of happening, I see Cedar Point's next coaster, if they don't remove a ride, will be located in the Picnic Pavilion area, which is just around 3 acres. But as seen earlier, could easily be extended into a lot more acreage. This is the area where Cedar Point needs a new coaster the most, since all they have in that area is Gatekeeper and Raptor. So by adding the next coaster on the left side of the park as you walk in would look great and would be a much needed new attraction in this area of the park. Now that you know my thoughts, what are yours? And what location do you think Cedar Point could build their next coaster without removing a ride or a coaster? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and do not forget to give this video a like, and I hope that you consider becoming the newest Keep Riding Coaster subscriber. As always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to smile today, think positive, and keep riding coasters.